Juventus then 2, Manchester City 0, and it's incredible we're having this conversation, but it's actually very, very apt now when you take a look at the big table and where things stand regarding Manchester City. You have to go all the way down to 22nd as to where Pep Guardiola's side currently sit. They've got PSG and Club Brugge in those remaining 2 matches, and you could argue they lose both of those, they will be eliminated from the Champions League. For more on this, let's welcome in, shall we? Frank Leboeuf joins us. We'll be hearing the thoughts from Frank in a moment.
But it's not a surprise, is it?
Well,
Palace away.
It's not a surprise. It's 1 win in 10 for Manchester City, and it's Pep Guardiola coming out afterwards and going, "I'm so proud of these boys."
For what? Last year?
You tell me.
The year before? The year before? I mean, they had 2/3 of possession. That's not the be-all and end-all. So they dominated that side of it, as they've done in a lot of games that they've lost recently. But their cutting edge and their guile and their injection of pace in the final third is not there. And that's reflected in the fact that they're scoring less goals. And the Haaland chance we saw, he really has to lift it a lot higher, which he doesn't do. As Ali said, when they're playing well, he probably does. But there's none of them confident at the moment. But it's not just that facet. I mean, it's now we're talking about Man City, who, over the last 3 or 4 years, you had to scratch your head whenever they were playing a really big game to think, how are they going to get beat? How's one of the elite teams going to beat them? Even in the final, when they won the Champions League, they didn't play well, but they're still better than Inter Milan. But now it's a problem up front at times. There's a problem in midfield, obviously, injuries and personnel, and there is an even bigger problem at the back. So, and on top of that, he's changing his goalkeepers. Yep. So there's now a problem in this City side. They've gone from the team to beat in England and Europe to a headache in every facet of this team. I don't think I've seen a downfall as quick for such an elite level, talented team with this kind of manager in charge. Maybe a little drop-off. This is a big drop-off.
And I think that's exactly the point. You expect that a team eventually is going to come back to the crowd. Eventually, you're going to run out of magic. Eventually, things are not going your way. And maybe there'll be a blip. Maybe. You lose a couple of games here and there. That's what you come to expect. But this is not a blip. This is now the reality of Manchester City. And so to your point, Craig, when we asked ourselves in years past, how are they going to lose? Now we're asking our question, and it's a very valid question, and it's no exaggeration. How are they going to win? How are they going to win? And I think that's where we are with Manchester City. Now, it's one thing if us three sitting here and Frank from afar, we're asking the question, how are they going to win? I think they're asking themselves that question. How are we going to win a match? And I don't think that they have the answers. And those answers are not coming from the players out of the field or the manager on the sidelines. And that's why you hear Pep Guardiola coming out and saying exactly the same things. After a disappointment result, he just kind of goes, no, I'm just proud of my players. At some point, it's not so much about the pride that you feel on your players. At some point, you need to find answers. And at some point, you need to adjust as a manager how you play. And defensively, you have to be far more organized and far more pragmatic. And all the things that you have done up until this point in your career have prepared you to be able to make changes on the run. And they're not making any changes. The players are not adjusting. The manager is not adjusting. And obviously the results are not adjusting either.
Yeah, and this is evident, isn't it, Frank, that there doesn't seem to be an answer from Pep Guardiola.
No, and we certainly don't have the answer. He has to find it inside the squad, inside the dressing room, to make sure that he can work hard. But really, it's, as the guy said, you wonder where they should start to make it better. Because it's like the players have been robotized for years. Everything has been working very well, but it's like the computer is not there anymore. And so at some points, they loses it, and we don't recognize them. They used to have certain point in the last third, a little bit of change of pace. They were slow, they were quite boring, but they were very effective because at the end of the day, they had a chance to score. Defensively, they were so strong that, as Craig mentioned, hard to say that who could beat them, who can even score against them. And in the middle of the park, Of course, we have Rodri, but we have the best of De Bruyne, we have the best of other players, and we don't have it anymore. And it's like, even in a dugout, Guardiola is wondering what he can do to change something. My idea is that generation is getting at the end of it, and he will have to find a new generation. And it's not, I'm very sorry for example, I'm going to take the example, Guardiola or Rico Lewis can, change something comparing to other players that Guardiola used to have with more experience, with a bigger talent. Those two players are talented, but they're not yet there. So it's going to take up maybe a while to see a new performance City, but it's brutal. It's really brutal what we are seeing right now.
They could get knocked out, Craig, in this competition.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we're not just sort of painting that picture as if it's something, it's probably not going to happen and we're just sort of baiting it because it's Man City. It actually could. They're playing PSG, I believe, who are also in trouble. So that's now a big game, huge game between those two. And then I think it's Club Brugge. But again, it wouldn't matter who. It could be the worst team in this table when we see it. It could be the team at the bottom. Really makes no difference at the moment. It could be young boys or some Sturm Graz, teams that have been getting pretty much hammered by most, and you'd be sitting saying, well, you could see them beating them, and it was like the performance away against Sporting. It was shocking defensively. So he got Man United at the weekend. I mean, come on. I mean, surely to God, this City side have enough to at least get back on the horse and go again against Man United.
We go back to why? Why? What have you seen that suggests that they will get back
Well, I've seen Man United. But, I mean, they might be looking at it, Ruben Amorim might be looking at it going, that's not, I tell you what, there's never a better time for them to play.
Well, that is 100% true.
So, I don't know. I just don't know what you're going to get from this side. And it's up to him to try and fix it, which he just seems very, apologetic about the whole thing.
Yeah.
How I feel sorry for me. It's the boys are doing great, and how can you be proud of a team that has hardly kept a clean sheet for the best part of 6 weeks? It's just not good enough.
But structurally, when a team struggles, and I don't care what level it is, whether it's Manchester City or it's young boys, when a team struggles, the first thing that a manager should do, hey, defensively, let's figure ourselves out.
Right.
But that hasn't been a priority for Pep Guardiola at any point over the course of his managerial career. But once you figure out that your team has changed, that your team has now taken a step back, you as a manager now have to accommodate that. You have to adjust to that and say, structurally, we're going to have to be more disciplined. And we're going to change some things up until we find who we once were.
But we're 10 games into this run.
Well, that's my point, Dan. That's exactly. Look, I didn't wake up this morning trying to get worked up about Manchester City, but this is why I get worked up about Manchester City, because we're 10 matches into this, and who we consider to be the best manager in the world, or in the conversation the best manager in the world, is coming out and actually putting out explanations in terms of how proud he is of his players. No. If I'm a Manchester City fan, I want to see this team doing something different to change what's happening in front of me and what's been happening. Yeah. And it's not coming. The change hasn't happened yet. So what makes us think that it's actually going to come? Too many stubborn people here, including Pep Guardiola.
The manager's not changing his ways because the manager knows, sorry Frank, that he's not going to get the sack. Most managers on a run like this would be under a lot of pressure. Apart from us having a go and a few others and blah, 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 and the media maybe asking him some questions in the press conference about his tactics and his results, there's nothing internally pressurising him because he has so much success. And he is regarded as the best coach on the planet at this moment in time. And so there's no real need for him to go away, apart from the fact it's results. I think in his mind, they're not going to sack me, so we're just going to continue doing what we're doing because that's the way that I want to do it and that's the way that I've been successful. Whereas this current squad, in terms of who's available, really needs to find a different way to get results because the current way they're doing it isn't working. But we have a manager here who's got so much money in the bank, I think he's unwilling to change his philosophy because he knows he's pretty much, they can't touch him. In terms of, him losing his job, which would just be crazy with the success he's had. So that breeds some sort of, overconfidence in terms of how you're approaching games. They could go out of this Champions League. That's going to be big for them. They've got all these charges hanging over them. They've got various things. They need to get this going quickly. And I think if they do go out of this Champions League at this stage, he's going to get a lot of questions. And particularly if the Premier League run keeps going.
Yeah, of course.
There has to be an end game to that. So, but as I say, he's probably the most untouchable manager in the world. But that is fast changing.
Go on, Frank.
Yeah, it brings us to the question, according to what Craig just said, the fact that we all consider, because of the success that he had throughout his career, Guardiola is the best coach in the world. But how do you design or rank a coach as the best in the world? Isn't he somebody who can sort out any problems, who can have an option to, who can deal with problems? Or is it somebody who brings good players with lots of money, brings, of course, a tactic, a way of playing, like Guardiola did for Barcelona, for Munich, and for Manchester City? But now he's in front of a big test. He has to find out, without spending money, with the player that he has, if he can have an option too. That's, for me, his way to show us that he's really the best coach in the world. He showed it in one way. I want him to show it in another way. Having problems and not spending like 500 million to get the 5 other players. I want him to sort out the problem with the players that he has already, because they're already talented. But he has to change, as I think Ali mentioned, he has to change the way of playing, because they cannot play the way they used to play. That's a fact.
Meanwhile, I was just going to move on, or did you want to say something? Frank, what did you make of Juventus today?
I found them boring in the first half, but really the second half, they were more vertical. They tried something. They were courageous. They went for it, and I love. Well, at first I have to say that I really appreciate Gatti. I didn't know him. I have to say that he was absolutely fantastic today as a centre back, and Yildiz showed that he has a real talent as well. With Vlahovic, they were very much a threat to Manchester City. I think they deserve to win. They scored 2 great goals, and they did what they had to do to change the game, because they were too conservative, I would say, the first half. They tried more the second half, and they didn't pay off.
Second goal was impressive, wasn't it, Craig?
Oh, yeah. No, it was a good goal. Obviously made some waves here in the United States amongst people who get very excited very quickly. But no, it was the 2 substitutes combined, and a great finish from Weston McKennie. There you go.